All right, hello everybody. Welcome back. Thanks for joining again. We have Eric here who's going to talk about Repo Prompt. Many of you have asked about this, and it's a really cool tool. So we've been talking this entire time about um, how important it is to make context and how important it is to like build your prompts and make sure that your agent has the information to even have a chance at being successful. And Repo Prompt is a tool that helps with that. And on the website, it says, what is Repo Prompt for? And it's like building optimal prompts to solve problems. So it's like, that's what we've been talking about. So it fits very well. Um, so this session will be interactive. So don't hold questions till the end. Go ahead and ask as you go. You can do like the raise hand emoji thing, and then we can call on people to interrupt and ask. I think you'll get the most out of it if you get your questions answered. So please do that a lot. Go ahead.
All right. Well, thanks, Isaac. Yeah, so I've been building Repo Prompt for a while now. It's been over a year that I've been working on it. Yeah, if it started off and like if you've been following AI development over the last year or so, like you've seen how things have transformed quite a lot. So like I started off building this tool just as a way to solve my own problems working on a game. So the game that I was working on was a Vision Pro game for the Apple Vision Pro. My background is in XR, and the thing I needed to get done was solving the problem of getting context into, the AI model. And at the time, agents were really terrible. And a lot of the tools out there, like Cursor, had very strict context limit rules. So I wanted to get more use of the context window, build prompts that had more information. And it started off just selecting files. So let me start off by sharing my screen. I think it'll be easier to kind of show off what I'm talking about when doing that. So okay, cool. Can you all see the app open right now? Is that clear?
Yep, we can see it.
Cool. So this is a test project I have. This is the project that I was like working on initially when I was starting off. I actually haven't touched it in a long time because as I started building Repo Prompt to solve problems for it, I kind of just focused more on that as it was seemingly much more valuable to do. So, working with an agent, I think like most of you are going to spend most of your time like working with agents. The thing you want to really be cautious of is trying to kind of have too much ambiguity going into your prompt. Like, generally the best results when you're working with an agent is when you've thought about like what is my problem and being very clear about it. And then you want to specify very clearly what parts of the code base you should be thinking about when you're doing that. And at the same time, you want to avoid having too much information to overwhelm the agent. And depending on what agent you use, another problem you might run into is that the agent doesn't handle a lot of too much context up front. So you have to be careful, like overwhelming the model. So you have to break down your tasks. There's all this work you have to do into preparing what it is that you want to be doing, especially if the scope is very large. So when I go about working on with models, there's like two kinds of things I want to ask myself. So like one is like, yeah, thinking about the scope, like how big of a task is this? Should I really spend time planning this task and thinking carefully about what it is that I want to be doing? Or is it like I just want to do a small fix and then I'm okay with kind of iterating with the fix to kind of make sure it works well? But sometimes even that you want to have like a really smart model, really think through like what is the right way to fix this, because might seem like a simple fix, if you just run Claude code, it'll go ahead and patch some things and then maybe it solves the problem, but maybe it didn't solve the root cause. Maybe you're exposing leaks later on. So you want to really be careful about like how it is that you're deciding, what you should be doing. So the way that I work a lot, oftentimes nowadays, especially since like you're getting me a good time, I just released this update in Repo Prompt called the context builder. It's the new context builder. And what's cool is that you can pick the agent that you want to work with it, and you can pick the model you want. So I have it set to Haiku just for demo purposes, but generally I don't recommend really using Haiku for this because it works only really well in very small code bases. It's fast, but like it's not optimal for like doing some of the more complex parts of this. Um, so generally, like you can start off by just typing what it is that you want to do. You can pick some files. I want to work with these files. So this is actually not that much context, so most models can handle it well. But in the context of an agent, that might still be too much. So if you want to have like an agent, really you want to try and cap it around 15K tokens. It's like a good spot if you want to just paste directly into an agent. If you want to go up to like if you're using GPT-5 Pro, which I use quite a lot in ChatGPT. So if you've got like a Pro plan, um, it's really convenient because you can just go hop on a ChatGPT. You get the smartest model in the world, the GPT-5 Pro, to really think through your problems. Every prompt. Oh, I don't know. I don't think that my thing is showing this, but there's the drop down here because I think it gets cut off with the screen sharing. But there's a drop down here. You can pick which mode you want. I've got it set to planning now, which adds like a prompt for architecting your changes. Um, cool. So basically, I've got this. It's set to that 60K tokens. It's a small task. I want to refactor my input to handle touchscreen input because it's a Vision Pro game. So if I hit run discover on this, what's going to happen is you have your agent you've chosen to go off. It's going to start reading around your code base. And it's gonna understand everything about the state of the app, so it can know like what you have selected, what you've got typed out here, which presets you've got active, all that kind of stuff. And it uses a feature called code maps, which Repo Prompt supports, which allows you to kind of map out. So you see these are building up, so I can show you what a code map looks like. So code map, I don't know if this is cut off also because of the screen sharing. Maybe this one's easier. Anyway, the point is you get like method definitions. So if you've worked with C++ before, you've got header files and basically code maps are a way to kind of bring that facility to pretty much any language that is supported. So you get like these representations of files that are much simpler, so the model knows how to use them without having to expose like the whole file. So it's a good way to compress tools. So the model picked out these two code
So
maps.
is
Yep, sorry.
is that kind of like an almost like APA reference or just the function
Yep.
signatures? So okay.
Exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. So that's like one of the functionalities. So like when you're building prompts, you want to try and provide information and maybe your file is referencing this class here, but you don't want to include the whole thing because really all you need is like the reference, not the whole type. And so having the ability to have an agent go in, read the references, they can get a bird's eye view of the code base. They can pick out things that are relevant to a prompt if there's space for them, and then focus on the main actual files that are related to the task that need to be changed. And so this is great here because as you see, like after I ran the context builder, it updated my prompt with my task. So it reframed the task. It uses some best practices for writing prompts, which is to box in different sections of your prompt in XML. It talks about the architecture, so it provides context about how the current code is set up, what is handling what and where. So input is handled in these different entry points. There's these interfaces. What is reading the input, and then you have the data flow, and then there's some constraints that are kind of thought about. So like raising these things. Here are some decision points. So sometimes the model will word this as a open questions. Key decision points is good too. So what's good if you have this is to go ahead and answer these questions if you want to kind of point the model in the right direction afterwards. Um, and then you have some dependencies and what's selected. So depending on the model, that this might produce slightly different prompts, but yeah, like at the end of the day, you have a prompt that's 11,000 tokens. I could paste this straight into Claude Code if I wanted, or Codex, or since it's quite small, or I can go into GPT-5 Pro to generate a plan, and go from there. So like the main thing I did here was just like have the model know the tools of Repo Prompt, so I don't have to kind of understand and tweak every little thing. The model can use them for me. I just can be quite vague here. I can optimize, the key points that are ambiguous, and then everything kind of goes through. And the nice thing is when you're enhancing a prompt, you don't want to just like have GPT-5 like write you a better prompt or Claude write you a better prompt. You want like a prompt enhancement that is contextual to the task and to the code base. So this came at the end of this research phase that the model did, pulled together really good context about your code base, the task, and is able to kind of give all of that for you. So like this is the way that I kind of really start most of my tasks. I just kind of go in here, pick my agent, get to work. If I have more patience, I can use Codex, which is a lot more thorough in how it builds things. In a small code base, it's not really a big deal, but in a larger one, you want to really be careful because it might have to slice up files to break them into smaller pieces if you have really large files, if they take up too much space in the context window. So yeah, any questions from here? I've been going off for a lot, so I want to make sure that everything I've been saying is kind of clear, and if there's any questions from that.
Yeah, I've got comments and questions, and then hopefully people
Mhm.
can do it. So add on. So first comment is like that idea of having like this code map or API list or function
Mhm.
signatures or whatever. I have found that really helpful. It like really
Mhm.
cuts down on the amount of hallucinations, and it really
Mhm.
helps on larger code bases. So that's great. Um, how often? So you put in a little bit of a prompt and it expanded it to like a much larger list of
Mhm.
instructions. How much do you um how much do you like iterate from there or like edit the instructions usually? Is it usually done or
It
do you
depends
edit
on
things?
the complexity of the task. It depends on um what model generated this. So Haiku is a little bit less reliable generally than if you want a smarter model. Sonnet also might glaze over some things. So sometimes it's not so much the prompt that's the problem. I mean, sometimes it might make some assumptions, but I try to like leave it. Usually it's pretty good. Sometimes it's really just not taking up enough of the token count. Like if I have a 60K budget and it's not sufficiently filling up. In this case, they didn't slice anything, so this is fine because that's really all that's needed. But in some cases, you have like really complex data flows and you might want a little bit more iteration. So sometimes I'll just resume from here and have it like pick up where it left off, do another run to really do another pass on it. But the thing that goes from here is that this is not like a whole plan. This is just the context for your task. And then from here, if it's sufficiently unambiguous, you can kind of go ahead and just implement it. But if it is ambiguous and there's not quite like in here, there's like different ways of thinking about it. Like this task is just kind of like, here's what we want, here's where you should think about touching it. That's not like enough to kind of solve the problem A to Z. That's just enough to give a model who's going to do some planning the context to do that plan. So generally what I do from here is I paste this into GPT-5 Pro and ChatGPT, and I have it really reason about the context that's given, the task, and find like the right way to kind of architect this. And then you can kind of give it to an agent, like Claude Code or Codex, just the plan, and everything's kind of been chewed up. You can revise the plan, make some edits at the end if you need to. But generally, once you've got, if this seed prompt is good and all the questions are assessed, like the main thing is just open questions and decision points. Like that's really the main thing you want to put your focus on and on answering. And then from there, the planning model should have all that ambiguity resolved and solve your problem perfectly.
Great. So a couple of questions. I'm going to read questions from our
Mm-hmm.
Discord. So
Yep.
if people want to ask them live, just do like the
Mm-hmm.
hand raise in Zoom and I'll call on you instead, but otherwise
Mm-hmm.
I'll read them. So question, is repo prompt only for code bases? I can see something like this being useful in other contexts as well.
Hmm. Yeah, so no, so the answer is it doesn't have to be only for code. I know people who use this for legal purposes or medical. The only constraint is that it uses plain text documents. So if you're throwing in PDFs and stuff, it's not going to be supported right now. But if you have a bunch of plain text files like Markdown or whatever else, it will read them just fine, and you can do file editing, parsing. This context builder works just fine with it. So it doesn't require it to be code. You won't get the benefits of this like API abstraction code map stuff, but that's not required to make use of the app. That's just like a nice plus.
Is this similar to asking an agent to generate a readme.md file with project structure?
It can. The nice benefit of this is one, like it's focused. So the Repo Prompt tools are very focused on, search navigation. They're very token efficient. And the big thing is that it's giving it tools to very efficiently using minimal tools, slice up your code base and organize it to generate these big prompts. If you had an agent kind of really build the same prompt that is generated from this, because this includes like all of the files, it includes these APIs. It includes everything kind of done. It would take one a lot longer for the agent to kind of get all that organized because the tools are optimized to kind of make it easy for the agent to just pick out, iterate, understand token counts, kind of keep setting up the context. So this is a lot more capable than just asking the agent to kind of go and make a document. Because the document you'd get is probably just what's in this prompt, but then the rest of the prompt that's here is a lot of value too if you want to kind of give that to a reasoning model to really think about a plan. So that's where you're getting a lot of the gains.
Awesome. Shirang, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Sure. Yes, I did unmute. Sorry, my camera is still busted for some reason. I don't know why.
Oh,
No
that's
worries at all.
okay.
Yeah. I like the way it is structured, Eric. And is there? Can you guide us through the intuition of all these tags that you put there? It almost
Hmm.
looks like you are recreating the development process, actually, or sort of decision-making ADRs or
Hmm.
RFC. You kind of are simulating, like when you are guiding code with header files, you kind of like an MCP almost like that. What is, I mean, what should come before? Does it chunk on everything? Like constraints to, but it has to manage so many things in its memory at the same time, actually, right? I mean, is it a
Uh,
linear fashion? Is it a non-linear fashion? Does it go through these gates that you put in terms of constraints, dependencies, or kind of it is all at once?
okay. I mean, I'm not sure the question exactly in there, like how to frame it, but I mean, are you talking specifically only about the context builder? Like, in what context are you asking about this
No, I
this
think
process?
the first, I think there were two questions in there. One was the
Hmm.
fact that you provided all these sections. Is
Yes.
almost kind of akin to a developer, how they go
Yeah, an
through their
IDE.
own
Hmm.
IDE or the sort of our development process. Oh, first write your requirements, then you write your some ADRs, which
Yes.
might have already happened.
Right.
You kind of give all of that.
Yes.
But I'm also trying to understand in the LLM's memory, is there a linear thinking? Is it a kind of throw everything all and turn everything on and let's see what
Okay.
code comes out?
Okay. So in terms of that part of it, the process and how you work with the agents, the thing to think about is that, so for one, agents, well, they have a limited context window, right? So you can't give them everything. You can't just say read the entire code and then help me solve this problem, because the code is oftentimes much too large to all fit in the memory of the code, of the context window. So what you have to do is you have to figure out, one is like, what is the subset of the code base that is most relevant to my task, and to try and optimize your prompt around that subset. So you want to try and illuminate the parts of that in the code base, and then you can kind of create a focus plan on how you're going to modify that part of the code base to solve your problem. So that's kind of the part of like how I think about discovering context, clarifying your instructions, and then generating a plan to solve your problem. um,
Look,
yeah. Does that make sense?
yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, was there a
Appreciate
second
that.
part of that question you wanted in
The
there, or was
second
that
part
clear at
is,
the same time?
should
Yeah.
I kind of give it in a gradual fashion? Okay, just let's make a
Uh-huh.
POC, let's make it work. Now let's add these ADRs. Now let's add more stuff.
Yeah.
Because
um
rather than turning all the neurons on at the same time, I
yeah.
was thinking whether should I guide the neurons in a particular way. Yeah.
So the way I would think about it is well, first of all, is like, what is the complexity of what you're trying to do? So like, if you want to kind of have a really complex feature and you want to kind of roll it out slowly, it's not so much about like giving it all at once to the model. It's more like how much ambiguity is there in the implementation of what you're working on. So if you're
Mhm.
saying like, I want all of this feature, but you haven't clarified like exactly what each function is going to be doing and how it's going to connect to the other functions and all these other parts of the code, then the model has to figure that out as it's going. And if you ask it to figure out too much at once, it's going to either burn out of its context window and not be able to finish, or like it's going to have to spend too
Mhm.
much time thinking, and then it can distract itself. And if you give it too many spots to make its own choices, that's when you're going to get poor results. So that's why I spend a lot of time clarifying what I'm working on, planning with architecture. So this plan mode in the app, it focuses exclusively on architecture to kind of clarify all that ambiguity. So like the way that I
Mhm.
work with this is mostly around how can I remove ambiguity from each LLM call, and often I reset the context between each action so that we can kind of start fresh. Here's what I know so far. Here's where we're going. And you can kind of stop in between. And if you're working with an agent and you want to really just stay in the agent, like the reprompt's great for many things. But if you're just working in an agent, like one thing that I do a lot is just like, when I'm getting to the end of a context window, we write down, I have it write a doc and say, okay, what do you know about what we've been doing? What has been done so far? Like, what is the overall task? And then what is left to be done? And then if you have all of those things clearly documented, you can make it a lot easier to kind of jump to a new session, start up from there. the model will have to relearn how the code works because it still has to read this context to
Hmm.
get it in memory. But at least you'll skip a lot of the discovery part and you're able to kind of resume from a good point. So like you have to think of agents as having amnesia between each
Right.
call. Like you have to really give them the right information. You don't want to overwhelm them with too much information, and you want to keep them focused on the tasks.
Is that, sorry, one more, another
Mm-hmm.
question. Is that what they say that use a pre-built KV cache and kind of load it into the next session?
No, well, I mean, the preloaded KV cache is when you have caching within a session. If you don't want to preload the KV cache for a new session, that's not like a thing that's typically done. Um, but it's mostly just around like providing context, like you don't have to overthink it too deeply on the technical side. It's just providing
Hmm.
enough information to the model to kind of get what it needs to done, but also being efficient with what you're giving it, because if you give it too much, it will often glaze over some parts and kind of start reading things on its own. I find if you're using Codex, for instance, it's able to handle a lot more upfront information and reason with that. But if you use Claude Code, it's going to make more assumptions and it's going to kind of jump into things and kind of ignore parts of what you've asked it to do. So you have to be cautious. LLMs are not smart. They seem smart, and they can occasionally be brilliant, but they're not like a human smart. They're very different. So you have to treat them almost like
Great.
children sometimes and guide them through
Got it.
things. Yeah,
Got it. Thank you so much. That helped a
no
lot,
worries.
actually, especially
Hmm.
the part about kind of amnesia part and
Hmm.
is make it write down what you understand so far, or I can write
Yeah.
down what I
Yeah,
know. And because I know that with between just wipe coding all of this stuff, it forgets what
of course it
happened
does.
about
Yeah.
10
Hmm.
steps ago and all of that. To hold everything in context is super important. Yeah. Thank you.
Hmm. Yeah, no worries.
Maybe a quick question. As far as I understand, this is Mac only. Are there any plans to support Linux or Windows?
Yeah, as in the plans, it's just the app has evolved a lot since I started building it, and especially with this new context builder feature that touches into agents directly. There's a lot of like OS specific calls that happen. So I'm a solo dev, so I have to prioritize where I'm putting my energy. But I'm starting to kind of nail down a lot of things, and from there, I'm gonna work on supporting those other platforms. It's just finding the right time to kind of branch off to, like, I've done several attempts to kind of start over, but like it's two code bases that's going to be required, so it's a lot of work. So for now it's Mac only. I'd say for the while future it is, but at some point it will be cross-plat.
Great. Yako?
Oh,
Yeah,
you're muted. Oh, there you
unmute. So,
go.
I go back to the amnesia thing. So,
Hmm.
everyone is trying to fight back the amnesia and trying to find the right context. So, one of the emerging practices is that we have started adding these Claude MD files and agents MD files.
Yeah.
So, how do you see this? Is this like a complementary to those? Does this work with those practices, or is this like more like an alternative to them?
Claude MD files, you have to be careful with them because, for one, the agent doesn't always read them, or if it reads them, it doesn't always consider them. So they're not a silver bullet. And if you put too much in them, you'll also overwhelm the model, and you're filling up your context window with rules that may or may not be listened to, and that might actually produce worse results. So you have to be very careful, like what you're giving the model each time you have a session. My MD files for agents MD or Claude MD, like they're very very minimal. They're focused more on like what tools to work with, like and how to get certain things in these situations. Just keep them very small, ideally like less than 100 lines. Like that's like what I would say is the sweet spot. You're not going to use that as a place to kind of install memory, give it information about like your code base, all these things. A lot of that information will get stale quickly, and you've got just like outdated stuff that's in there and it's going to distract the model. Um, I'd also say like try to avoid having too many MCP servers. Try and keep things as minimal as you can. Um, and that's why like with Repo Prompt, I spent a lot of time like trying to, before I start each task, gathering what is needed. You're like conjuring up context and then giving that to the agent to let it get to work effectively, just as efficiently as possible. Um, yeah, hopefully that answered
Yeah,
your
so
question.
so if I can phrase how I can understood
Hmm.
this, so basically all of these toolings they are rather static. So what you're saying
Yes.
is that this is more like a dynamic way of creating the context on the fly.
Well, it's like on the fly for a task. Like it's yeah. You want to. It's a mix of things. Like for the first thing you want to do is provide ways for the model to reach for the information that it needs, and that's what like agents are good at with the tooling, with file search and all these things. And Repo Prompt has all of that built in as well. And the second thing is just spending time preparing what you want the model to do. And is your question ambiguous or is it clear? Like, is your prompt well structured? Does it include specific information about where to look for certain information? So you try to like build the context up in such a way that the model knows how to get to work with this. Like I have all of this context here. So if I was going to use a plan, I could go ahead and plan in ChatGPT, or I can just hit copy on the instructions itself. And just this prompt alone at this point, because the model did all the research, understood like everything, the agent can kind of fetch what it needs afterwards. It doesn't need to have all of these files in memory like just to work. But you know, when you're working with a reasoning model, ChatGPT, like I do find having the compressed version without turning off tool calls, you get like the whole reasoning trace allocated just towards your plan, and you can get like much more exhaustive results than if an agent is just reading parts of your code and not understanding the full picture. So that's why I spend a lot of time providing these options to give people what they need for that.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Very insightful. Yes.
Any other questions there, Isaac, or do you want me to just kind of continue showing off other things, or?
No more questions. There is site description suggestion, so no questions, but I'll send that to you for you to consider later.
Sure.
Just something that might make it easier for this person to understand faster. So yeah, I'd say kind of keep going. I think the key things here, it's like you want your context to always be up to date.
Yeah.
There's some things that you could put in your Claude MD and Agents MD file that are going to be true forever. There's some things that are going to change very rapidly. If they change very rapidly, then you would have to then kind of constantly update it. And so that's a problem. This helps you in a couple of ways. Gives you a big map of your code base through this code map, which is super helpful in seeing kind of the big picture. It's almost like, I guess, almost like a table of contents or an index for these models, and then helps you build like.
So there's multiple parts to that. I'll kind of get into that actually a little bit. So
great.
So the one part, you know, we mentioned the APIs for different files. So those are kind of like on the whole, like each file can kind of have its own if it's supported. But and then if you're running the context builder, the agent can kind of pick and choose what it wants in. You know, you as a user, if you're like, you know what, this class, like I don't really need the actual implementation, I can just shoot it over the fence to a code map. That's doable as well. Or I could bring it back here. The file tree is kind of more like that table of contents. I am really annoyed by this this screen sharing, but like here, I'll just paste that in here so you can see. So this is the file tree. It's not rendered really well because it's not this is not a monospaced type, but the agent will see it in monospace, so it'll look a little bit cleaner. But the main idea is, you know, this is like the directory of the code base. It tells the model like when it's looking up front, like what has a code, what is selected, what has a code map available, and you know all that stuff. And that's like super helpful for like giving the model just you know that directory structure to find things. You know, like agents can use different commands to kind of navigate the directories with like ls and that kind of stuff, but like they don't give you like that kind of efficient representation that's recursive. Whilst this, like, it also caps things, so you get like a token representation that will fit within a budget, so you're not going to overwhelm the model with like 200,000 tokens of directories if you have a huge enterprise code base. So that's very helpful. So those are the two pieces there that kind of help guide the model. Yeah, and so from there, like one thing that I built with this chat, this built-in chat, you know, it's got like built-in plan mode. So I was mentioning like I can go to GPT-5 Pro. I can also go in the app itself, and I'm working on like more models. I like to use GPT-5 High a lot, or GPT-5 Pro is very expensive, but you know you can work with that. And the thing that's nice with the setup here, versus in an agent, is that it's kind of like running completion style answers. So I'm chatting with the model. It's got all of the code base context that I've prepared, these selected files. You can see how many tokens it's going to take up. And then this is the mode that we're using, so planning. So I can have the model reason over this plan, and I'll just like run it. Actually, I'll switch it to just low, just so that it's not going to take forever to run. So the model is going to reason over this. It's got the task, it's got the context that we've set up, and from there is able to kind of give me that plan kind of in a clear way, and I can kind of implement it through this or run it with an agent afterwards. I actually have a mode with this where you can have an agent connect to the app and then interactively prompt the chat directly. So like it's able to use the whole app like completely A to Z, like for like on its own without you kind of being involved, which is pretty crazy. But yeah, just having a way to kind of chat with models that is a little bit different than what most tools provide is pretty valuable to me. Just because of that context organization. Like I really think through like what am I putting in the context window of the model? Is it relevant to this task? And how do I organize it in such a way that it focuses on the latest message and doesn't keep all kinds of clutter about the past? So that's kind of what you're going to see. So you see this plan here. So what it's doing is that it's giving details around like how to actually architect this thing. What kind of structs and classes should we set up? Where should we put things? How are you going to test it? What new files do we need? So it's setting all of this up. It's thinking through like a clean architecturally sound way of doing this work. So that when you're giving it to an agent, all it has to do is implement. It doesn't have to think. And that's what you really want with an agent, because agents don't typically have enough time in their context window, or like just in the way that there's something called context rot, context pollution, which I'll get into in a sec. But you don't want them to both think really hard and implement well, because if they do both, you're going to get average results on both sides. If you want it to think really hard, you can give it time to explore, and you want to kind of reset its context after with what it found, or you want it to kind of implement well. And I find personally, like when I'm implementing, like for planning, there's all these different planning tools. Claude Code has one, Cursor has one as well. But generally, the best plans for me come with having a reasoning model, see all of the context, that whole subset of the code base that's really important for this task, having it see all of it with clarity, and then being able to come up with a plan that perfectly suits in that context for the job. That's like the best results I find. So yeah.
As this model, like once it creates it, are you able to edit this model's response?
I don't have an edit feature here. That's a good idea to have. You can copy it out and do what you want with it. You can fork as well the chat and then kind of iterate. Yeah, I don't have a way to edit this text directly, unfortunately, but it's good. It's a good note. Yeah. Yeah. So just mentioning, context rot, context pollution, that's something that is like really important to consider. So when you're using an agent, one of the things you'll see is like as the model runs through its process, it will make tool calls, and then sometimes it won't find what it needs, or it'll find the wrong thing, or it'll focus on different things that are not actually relevant. And so all of that stuff sits in the context window. And unlike a human, we're able to kind of selectively ignore things. A model is not able to do that. The model considers everything all at once, and it just can't push away. So if you let the model see too much irrelevant things, it's not going to be able to shake that, and it's going to kind of consider this irrelevant garbage in its response. And so that's like context rot and context pollution that causes misfires and bad results when you're doing runs. So that's one of the things I really tried to address with this chat, is that I focus the model really on what is important right now. I don't leave that garbage in there. If it's making edits, it does even more aggressive cleaning and pruning. There's more and more tools that now will do some pruning of old context, but like it's always a difficult challenge where like you don't want to remove things that actually might be important to the model's understanding of what you're doing. But you also don't want it to think too hard about things that are completely irrelevant. So you have to try and make these choices and trade-offs in grooming that, and it's kind of tricky to do in practice. Yeah, there's a question there. Yeah.
Yeah, quick question on this. So
Mhm.
many times I've seen that while coding produces a state of code in which things are good, and you add something more, and suddenly you kind of just like, what the heck did you give me at this point in time? So would
Yeah.
it make sense to kind of save the state, version it, timestamp it, and say, okay, now take this, you've done good, and just fix this.
Yeah, of course. Always make heavy use of version control. You always want to make sure that you're checkpointing constantly, that you can roll back. Like a big part of my work building this is rolling back. I explore avenues. Where do we end up? Take a look at the code that was produced. You can either review it and iterate on it or start over and take your learnings, make a better initial prompt that takes those misfires into consideration and redirect the model in the right way so that when it runs again, you're getting a better result. Like you should think about working code now with models as you would like working on experiments as a scientist. Like you have a hypothesis, you want to kind of figure out if it works or not. You run experiments, and you end up in the right direction, but you don't want to just basically assume that your hypothesis is correct and go straight to the answer, because that's how you get bad
Eric,
science.
would it make
Yeah.
sense to periodically kind of initially the code is 0 and the agents.md is huge. And over time, when you're going towards a solution, the context is essentially the code it has produced and a decreasing size of the agents.md.
Like I said, I almost never put a lot in my agents MD at any point in time. I don't think it's a good idea. Um, at the start, maybe you want to have more, but like what you can also do is just prepare your MD file on the side, have the model reference that file explicitly. So it's not your agents MD file. It's like I plan to start the repo.md. And you say, read this file and let's kind of set it up. And so you don't want to put it necessarily all in the agent MD file because that's a file that's like a rule for how the agent should behave. You shouldn't use that
Mhm.
as a way to give the model knowledge about your code base. It's really not meant for that. It's meant for how the model should work, what tools should it call, if you have certain MCP servers that are important, which ones to call. So it should be very minimal at all times, even at the start. Like don't flood it with too much information.
Mm.
And I
Got it.
actually think, personally, I wonder if Eric agrees, but like I'd almost start smaller and have it grow if it must, rather than starting with like a whole bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you're doing something, so I tend to start with it very, very small. And if I'm noticing patterns where the model is doing something wrong, then my thought is, okay, where do I need to add context in? Maybe it was
Mm-hmm.
in the existing specification for this one feature. Maybe that's where I should have added it. Maybe it's an agent's MD because it's something that happens on every task I always give it. And this is like a model behavior thing. Um, maybe I have bad doc strings that are just completely wrong in the code base and it's reading incorrect information from the code base of the doc. So I guess it's like I would almost say like start minimal and then
Yeah.
add the context that you need when you see a problem rather than trying to start with like this perfect agents MD
Yeah.
file. Because you'll probably won't print it down. Realistically, you'll start with a big and you probably won't print it down. But if you start and you're only adding the stuff that actually makes a difference, then I find you end up with a better thing.
Yeah.
That is all
But
valid. And I just want to throw one caveat there is that even if you're very well intentioned and very efficient and you're like, this is a model flaw and like, don't write fallback code, don't write this or that. Sometimes even having those rules doesn't do enough to stop the model from doing them. So you can't expect that your MD file is like a gospel that the model will always adhere to because you're fighting the training, you're fighting all kinds of things. These models are built in a way that's kind of ossified and if you're observing poor behaviors, it doesn't mean that your agent's MD will prevent those poor behaviors. Just keep that in mind. You can try and have them there and they might help, but it might also not, and the model might ignore it completely. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, completely agree.
Eric, follow up, and
Mhm.
Isaac, a follow up on that earlier question. So, in a normal development process, you start with the PRD, and some
Mhm.
code get generated, POC, people like it, and so okay, now let's add this, and let's add this, and let's make it resilient. So, the same way, can I progressively provide the context, and the context being first zero code, and progressively introduced the instructions, and
Mhm.
then I give the code because, hey, you came up to this point. This is great. Now let's add these ADRs to it. Great, fantastic.
Mhm.
Now let's add resiliency to it. Great,
Mhm.
fantastic. Let's add this to it. So
Yeah.
kind of my context is code plus instructions.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah. What
Excellent.
was there? Was there like I'm not sure. Like, what was the question
No,
in there
what I meant to
exactly?
say is
Yeah.
that many times what I've done is I kept on loading the context and which with the works. Absolutely, the PRD as well as ADRs plus this plus that, everything that it could hold. It's almost like too much context, I
Yeah.
feel.
Yeah. You
So,
definitely
and
don't
I
want to do
never
that.
used to give it code. So now what I feel is I should give the code base that it has produced in the last run that I liked, and then, hey, take this code and just make it resilient. And the instructions is just to make it resilient and
Yeah, no,
not the
that's
works.
so I wouldn't do it exactly like that. So there's a few things there that I want to address. So one thing is taking a big PRD and going straight to code is definitely not the way that I would go about it.
Hmm.
Because for one, a PRD is like a set of features that you want and how they should act and behave, but it's not like a roadmap on how a developer should implement that feature. So it's not an architectural RFC. It's not like the whole part of it that an engineer would do. Because typically in an engineering org, you go from PRD, that's the product manager's job. Then you give that to the engineering team to figure out how to scope it, how to break it down, how to make milestones out of it, how to build the tasks and what those tasks should do. And then in those tasks, like what the architecture should be and what the specific code changes should be to get to that outcome. And that whole pipeline of work that you want to do, that's why I spend so much time planning with architecture, is because once you have your PRD, like if I were to do that, you could paste your PRD in the context builder, run the discovery, it'll find the relevant parts of the code, break down that PRD into a task, and then find the parts of the code that are relevant to that and surface that information so that you can give the model the right context on how to implement the feature, rather than um, just the high level, this is what we need done. If it's a really big PRD, and typically PRDs are very massive, you do want to try and do a refinement step where you're doing this loop of like, okay, what is all the architecture needed? How can we break that down into manageable steps? And what I often like to recommend is that, so you want to create multiple documents. So you have like your North Star document. You can have like phase one is a document. And then what you'll want to do is keep these documents up to date, like have like a central planning document, and that the agent, as it runs through a session, can kind of update what's been done, where we're at, what's next. Um, and then you restart the context window every time, and you read what you kind of get that context again. It needs to fill itself up, but you don't want to kind of overwhelm it because each time you run this session, like we said, we had amnesia, so the model has to reorient itself with your code base, has to reorient itself with your task and how it relates to the code base. So there's like all this step that needs to happen, and you want to try and remove ambiguity and remove like searching around as much as you can. But you also don't want to give it too much code if it's an agent, like because too much code, like the model will double check it and read it itself. Oftentimes, Codex is better at actually working with it as a state of truth, but Claude will recheck everything, so it's not that helpful either. So you have to be careful, like what you're doing, and that's why I always, like I said, focus on architectural planning with a reasoning model to kind of get the ambiguity out, what needs to be done with the bird's eye view to kind of get to the right solution. So, yeah.
Got it. That's fantastic. I'd love to hear that. And
Hmm.
breaking the PRDs and then architectural planning with the reasoning models. But you are
Yes.
okay with slowly code as context also.
Well, sorry, do you mean like putting code into the context window? How do you mean exactly?
Yeah, because then the thing is that now that you're progressing, let's just say you build the architectural layer, and now said, okay, now take the code that you produced in my
Yeah.
last few runs, and just
Yes.
add this to it. So code is
Yeah.
also now going as context.
Yeah, but you're going to reset the context window between runs. You want to make sure
Yes,
that like, yeah, so the model will,
yes,
you open it
yes.
up on your code base, it'll be able to read what's the current state, and you can say, hey, we worked on this feature, this is where it's relevant, these are the files that we touched. Um, we want to make this more resilient in XYZ ways. And then make sure we have some unit tests to verify that it's more resilient. Or before you even get to that resiliency question, you write those unit tests to try and prove that it's not resilient, and then have the model address those failures, by making it more resilient. So working with testing is very important. Typically, I would ask you to use a reasoning model to write code tests, or you can write them yourself if you feel like it, or you can write a spec for what the test should do, and the reasoning model will write it for you. I try to avoid having Claude writing too many tests without evidence. Like the thing you want to have is data to give these models. Like if you have failures that you're observing, you have log traces, you know, things that you're seeing that the software is not working in certain ways. Document all of that, provide as much detail that you can in these log files, these trace logs. Add prints in your code so that it can write down this information to a log, so it knows what the flow of code is, where it's hanging up, what is happening and what isn't happening. So the model can kind of see the run of the program in its context window, and then get to writing your fixes and resiliency.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Eric, this is almost like a lightning class here, right here.
Yeah.
That answer.
Yeah, no worries. Yes.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful.
Yeah, no worries.
All right, I'm not seeing any other questions. Are there any other topics that you think would be really helpful to cover before we break, Eric?
I mean, I give the tour. Like, I think like the main thing I wanted to go over is really just thinking about planning your context. I went over a little bit with the chat. I don't want to get like too deep into technicals on the rest of it, just with the time we have left as well. So, I mean, if all of this makes sense, like hopefully that's clear. Yeah, the main thing I wanted to show off, like I was saying, is like, how do you think about context? You know, how do you think about the life cycle of a task? You know, like spending time doing the discovery, removing ambiguity, checking on unanswered questions, trying to use reasoning models for planning if you can, thinking about context hygiene, like what you're putting into a prompt, like everything matters, tools or no tools. Like everyone uses tools now, but like maybe sometimes there's room for no tools, which I think is important. That's why I like turning the ChatGPT or the built-in chat here that turns off all these tools and just lets the model reason without having to find more stuff and distract itself. So all those things are important. And then once you have all of that set up, that's when you want to send your agent to work. If it's a complicated thing, if it's a simple thing, you can kind of just go with it and vibe. But generally, you don't want to do that too often. So no.
Yeah, I would say everyone here should go to the Repo Prompt site, install Repo Prompt, pick a feature. You can use the homework repo and add a feature from that. Or if you have your own project, even better. Pick a feature, try and go through the process with Repo Prompt. If this all made sense and like vibed with you, then great. If you felt like it didn't, well, you should do it anyway. You can learn the workflow. I think you'll learn a lot doing it either way, and you might end up liking it as well. So I would say everyone should definitely download Repo Prompt and pick a feature in a code base to do.
I just want to mention, Isaac. So the app, like there's a free version, but if you want to use these rich things, like it's not all free. But what I can do, there is a free trial, but I'm happy to give you all guys like a free month code if you want. I'll just reach out to Isaac. You can hand that out if you want. So you can give it a real shot if you want. See how it helps you. Yeah.
Yeah. Lots of hearts from that. So people
Cool.
love it.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, if that's it for today, yeah, it was good chatting with you all. Some good questions in there. Yeah, thanks for having me, Isaac.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for coming on. This was fantastic. I learned a lot.
Great. I'm glad. Cheers.
All
All right.
Bye.
I'll have a good rest
Thank you
of your day.
so much. Great session. Yeah, loved it.